Good afternoon. May I request everyone to please settle down. We are about to start. Thank you. If you can still move up front, please. A pleasant good afternoon to all of you. To those watching us via live stream, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. On behalf of the Egyptian Ministry of Finance, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance, I welcome you all to the joint seminar on cross-border infrastructure, future trends, and finance mobilization. We are delighted to have all of you here today as we witness our keynote speakers and distinguished panelists discuss future trends and needs for high-quality and sustainable cross-border connectivity infrastructure, innovations, and lessons from large financiers and developing countries on mobilizing finance for projects. My name is Jenny Lou Fernandez from the MCDF, and I am honored to be your Master of Ceremonies throughout this seminar. We are privileged to have Mr. Eddie Ijas as our moderator. Eddie is the Senior Advisor to the CEO of MCDF, Senior Non-Resident Fellow at the Brookings Institution, and Senior Advisor to the CEO of the Global Center for Adaptation. Eddie has over 30 years of senior technical and management experience at the World Bank, academia, and consulting. He has been featured in several global media outlets. Let us join Eddie in acknowledging our distinguished welcome remark speakers, panelists, and guests. Eddie, the floor is yours.
Jenny, thank you very much, and a good afternoon to all of you. It is a great pleasure to see so many of you coming and joining a conversation on what is a critical topic for bringing a more sustainable world together. We have a fantastic set of speakers coming from very diverse perspectives to really share some of the challenges, some of the innovations, some of the solutions to tackle cross-border infrastructure. And it is my great honor first to invite His Excellency, Dr. Mohamed Maid, the Minister of Finance of Egypt and AIIB Governor, who has had so many decades of public experience in the Ministry of Finance, Chairman of the Egyptian Financial Supervisory Authority, and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Africa Reinsurance Corporation. So, Dr. Maid, you honor us with your presence. We would love to hear your perspectives on cross-border infrastructure from Egypt. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be delivering my opening remarks today regarding this very important topic related to connectivity and linking infrastructure across regions. Cross-border infrastructure is an area of great opportunities for economic growth and mobilization of resources. It is also a form of sharing best practices and benefits among different countries, especially in the fast-growing sectors like sustainable transportation, digital infrastructure, and renewable energy. Having said that, the Egyptian Ministry of Finance is keen on implementing infrastructure projects with an overall goal of linking countries together across regions and borders. In this regard, the role of MDBs to us is essential to mobilize the necessary financing and resources to realize our development agenda. Egypt is a country situated at a strategic location at a vital cross-borders between Africa, Asia, and Europe, and firmly believes in these seminars focus on cross-border connectivity and regional integration, which are key thematic priority of AIIB, MCDF, as well as other MDBs. Egypt's distinct location has made it of special significance to the world, as it has helped serve as a hub for trade between between the East and West for centuries. The Suez Canal is the embodiment of this cooperation and further cements the role of Egypt plays as a trade hub and interlocutor, which is significant given that close to 90% of global trade is carried by sea. Distinguished guests, the development of infrastructure in a suitable and environmentally friendly manner ensure closer cooperation and to bridge geographical gaps and distance. In order to achieve these hopes and dreams, there is a need to persistently develop cross-continental economic integration and spur suitable economic development, progress and prosperity. In order for us to achieve our common goals, it is absolutely essential to lay the necessary frameworks to catalyze the mobilization of private sector capital alongside the public sector to be able to develop major projects that encourage cross-border connectivity and develop the necessary infrastructure to develop infrastructure and fill the huge infrastructure financing gap across our respective regions. There are many initiatives and policies that embody our desire to enhance cross-border connectivity. These initiatives, including the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, or the Build and Road Initiative, or the African Growth Corridor, highlight the essential need for cooperation between different countries and regions. This is bound to help spur economic growth and trade facilitation. Investment in cross-border infrastructure investment is critical. Operationalize and enhance logistics to enable trade within the framework of African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. This agreement covers a market of 1.2 billion people and an estimated GDP of 2.5 trillion US dollars across 55 member states of the African Union. Although this is a landmark achievement, it further adds pressure for the need to enhance infrastructure development in the region, as limited logistic capacity remains a key bottleneck in realizing this. The infrastructure investment gap within Asia and Africa is estimated to be around $630 billion per year, and the gap reaches around $1 trillion US dollars when taken into consideration the expected need for funding of social infrastructure. It is also estimated that deficient infrastructure networks cost African countries around 2% of GDP growth, which is significant. Therefore, cooperation between both continents is essential, as it helps provide many great opportunities. Cross-border infrastructure projects assist in establishing better investment ecosystems increasing more employment potential and mitigating high logistic costs, in addition to increasing competitiveness and exports. Another important aspect of these infrastructure projects is the potential of the private sector in playing a major role in their implementation and therefore contributing more to economic activities. This conforms to Egypt's strategy of increasing the share of the private sector in the economy to reach around 65% of total economic activities over the medium term. On the one hand, infrastructure projects are a cornerstone in enhancing Egypt's global connectivity and putting the country on the international and regional maps. To achieve these objectives, the government has embarked on a number of ambitious mega infrastructure plans, including the new Suez Canal project. Currently, canal handles close to 10% of global seaborne trade connecting Africa, Asia, and Europe, and representing an effective logistic and strategic base. In terms of maritime services, Egypt will further capitalize on its location and Suez Canal economic zone developments to attract more FDIs and foreign manufacturers, benefiting from the closeness to the Arab region, Europe, and Africa, as well as Egypt's comparative advantage to penetrate Arab, African, and European markets. Furthermore, Egypt is looking to upgrade its infrastructure of renewable energy, including green hydrogen initiatives, solar and wind energy, to conform to the global movement to depend on environment-friendly energy sources. Recent infrastructure development in Egypt have contributed in reducing the high cost of transportation compared to other countries in Africa, making it an easy-to-reach destination and paving the way to more trade, industrial development, and region integration, especially in the African continent. On the other hand, from the financing perspective, the Ministry of Finance has issued green bonds in September 2020 to be the first in the MENA region with its proceeds directed to clean and sustainable transportation and water waste management with an amount of $750 million. This was followed by publication of an impact report of this issuance, displaying for investors the progress of these projects to further deliver on Egypt's sustainable development objectives. Egypt has upgraded its financing framework to sustainable one that was launched during COP27 last year in November. Egypt considers cross-border infrastructure as a milestone on the critical path of productivity enhancement and long-term economic growth. In that regard, I am eager to listen to the interesting discussion in this session to further address the different aspects of cross-border connectivity and infrastructure with its challenges and opportunities in Africa and across different regions. Thank you very much for your attention and listening.
Dr. Maid, thank you very much for the insights of Egypt, which is such an important example of leveraging and how a country can leverage its geographical position in the connectivity to Africa, to the Arab region, Asia, and Europe, and leveraging the historical perspective and the opportunities that the Suez Canal gives, combined with renewable energy resources, combined with the opportunities of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. So thank you for combining all those elements that are so important for the discussion today. President Jin of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank was going to join us today, but due to unexpected last-minute circumstances, he's not able to accompany us. But we are very pleased that he has asked Dr. Urjit Patel, who is the Vice President of Investment Operations for South Asia, the Pacific Islands, and Southeast Asia, to join us today and deliver his remarks. Prior to joining the AIIB, Mr. Patel was governor of the Reserve Bank of India, and he has extensive experience in infrastructure, having served as president of Reliance Industries, executive director at IDFC, and fellow at the Brookings Institution. Mr. Patel, a great pleasure to have you here with us, please.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. Honorable Finance Minister of Egypt, Dr. Mait, distinguished panelists and participants. It is my honor to give some remarks at the Egyptian Ministry of Finance AIIB-MCDF seminar on cross-border connectivity. Growth, development, and digitization are opening new opportunities to connect people and economies and promote greater prosperity for all. However, capitalizing on these opportunities requires new infrastructure, project financing, and standards to address climate change and the broader sustainability challenges that we see around every day. We at AIIB are trying to help meet these needs and deliver infrastructure for tomorrow, I4T, that connects Asia and the world. Cross-border infrastructure is at the center of this mission. Infrastructure for tomorrow is a dynamic concept that will be shaped by rapid changes in the way markets function and people live, move, and work. And the COVID pandemic was an example of how dynamic we needed to be. Developing economies must invest in major domestic and cross-border transport, energy, digital, and water networks to maximize the benefits. But this requires a lot of money. With that in mind, AIIB financed 32 cross-border connectivity projects in these areas between 2016 and 2022. And we will seek to reach a 25 to 30% share for cross-border connectivity projects by 2030. Such progress is also crucial for achieving the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. The estimated annual need for sustainable infrastructure is about $1.2 to $1.7 trillion per year. Only about half of that is actually invested at present. By 2030, AIIB expects that our cumulative climate finance will reach $50 billion. Turning to connectivity, Asia and Africa in particular faces widening connectivity infrastructure investment gaps. Current macroeconomic conditions, fiscal sustainability issues, deglobalization, and the shifting trade patterns make it difficult to mobilize financing of cross-connectivity related projects because of the inherent risks that are there, including transnational ones. Connectivity projects, especially those that are across borders and involve more than one national entity, are difficult to design, structure, negotiate, implement, and sustain. We see AIIB playing a critical role in bridging the financing gap, bringing parties together, ensuring sustainability designs, and mobilize the private sector. As such, AIIB is working to effectively use technology to improve traditional infrastructure in 3 key connectivity sectors. In the area of energy, AIIB is pursuing regional, cross-regional, and domestic connectivity of energy systems, value chains, and virtual platforms. Our aim is to strengthen system reliability and flexibility, enhance the security and efficiency of supplies, optimize the use of resources, foster greater use of renewable energy, remove energy trade bottlenecks, and reduce adverse environmental and social impacts. With respect to transport, AIIB is taking forward cross-border road and rail projects. It is also open to supporting airports, ports, dry ports, inland ports, multimodal transport hubs, and logistics parks that move passengers and/or trade. To develop such transport projects, we are working with partners, including other MDBs, to develop, finance, and implement these complex projects and harmonize procedures and regulations. Regarding digital infrastructure, AIIB aims to support our clients, many of them are sovereigns, in bridging the digital divide, raising the efficiency of infrastructure, and increasing their economic competitiveness. At the same time, we are developing an infratech platform to promote increased adoption and development of technology in infrastructure through financing, connecting infratech stakeholders, and boosting innovation. For all 3 of these connectivity sectors, energy, transport, and digital, AIIB stands ready to provide the finance needed. But a key constraint is a lack of technical capacity in some countries to prepare bankable and sustainable projects. We are therefore delighted to be partnering with MCDF to help fund the preparation of projects and address the aforementioned key capacity bottlenecks. We look forward to hearing from our other speakers and participants today about the connectivity project experiences and suggestions for building the infrastructure for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Dr. Patel, thank you very much for sharing with us the insights and the perspectives of an organization that has as part of its DNA cross-border infrastructure and connectivity. And actually, it's not only cross-border infrastructure for today, but also for tomorrow, and your perspectives on how this connectivity can help not only national objectives, but also regional and global objectives in energy, in transport, in digital connectivity, that I think is going to be a really interesting opening for what we hope to have in the panel conversation later. And now let me invite the third organization that is co-sponsoring this seminar, Mr. Zhongjing Wang, who is the inaugural CEO of the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance. And prior to joining MCDF, Mr. Wang had several positions in the Ministry of Finance on China, has served on the board of multiple international organizations, including ADB, NDB, IFAD, and the Adaptation Fund. Mr. Wang, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Eddie. Your Excellency Minister Maid, Vice Minister Rosito, Vice President Patel, Vice President Quino, Vice President Chen, Vice President Gupta, Director General Cheng, distinguished guests, colleagues, and online participants. Welcome to the seminar on cross-border connectivity, future trend, and finance mobilization. I would like to thank the Ministry of Finance of Egypt and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank for co-organizing this event with us. Indeed, I'm of 2 minds as we begin this meeting. On the one hand, I feel excited because the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance is explicitly set up for building connectivity. Starting from 2021, MCDF has been working in partnership with international financial institutions, developing countries and their financiers to promote high-quality infrastructure and connectivity investments. This seminar is a great opportunity to advocate MCDF's mission and present some of its early achievements. On the other hand, I fear the journey toward a connected world is becoming more bumpy. In addition to some already identified obstacles like complexity, scale, and coordination, the pandemic, rising interest rates, food security, and energy shocks raise further questions about the future of connectivity. I hope this seminar will find some clues to help address these challenges. In our view, the importance of cross-border infrastructure is rising worldwide due to increasing demand. For example, the logistics sector is growing rapidly and is projected to reach $17 trillion in market value for the next 10 years. Realizing this growth potential depends on the expansion of cross-border infrastructure. There's also a greater need to ensure the sustainability of connectivity. Recently, in Latin America, the vessel weight and the daily traffic of the Panama Canal have been further restricted due to the drought weather conditions. Energy transition is another imperative, including transmission lines. In Asia and Africa, there's an urgent need to connect the green energy produced in renewable-rich countries to the renewable deficit corners of the regions. Building high-quality cross-border infrastructure is at the core of the MCDF's mission. We do so by working very closely with international financial institutions to help developing countries and their financiers prepare projects. In the past 22 months, we have allocated $22 million grants to support 14 projects in the transport, energy, ICT, and water sectors that are expected to mobilize $6.6 billion for 18 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I would like to report here to you half of the allocations, over $10 million, go to support African countries. We also support the software infrastructure and capacity building. One example is our work with the African Development Bank to help East African community member countries boost the digital trade among themselves and with countries in other regions. Another key point I would like to flag is MCDF's approach to connectivity is based on partnership and quality. Cross-border projects tend to be expensive and require multiple financial sources. Our solution is to build partnerships among all kinds of financiers, multilateral, bilateral, and commercial, to harness the potential of different investors and reduce risk exposure to any single financier. Of the 14 projects, we have supported 4 of them involve both an FI and another financier. For example, the Road Development Program in Lao PDR brings together the financing from AIIB and the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development. Other emerging market financiers we have been working include the Brazil Development Bank of Minas Gerais, China Exim Bank, Commercial International Bank in Egypt, and the Bank of Africa in Morocco. Let me now turn to quality. If infrastructure projects are not developed using high standards, their development impact will be jeopardized. MCDF is addressing this in 2 ways. Firstly, our financing facility provides grants through FI implementing partners to fund the project preparation and the capacity building aligned with their standards and practices. This support includes feasibility study, environmental social debt assessment, and the project readiness support. Secondly, MCDF's collaboration platform leverages expertise from 11 key FIs to help governments and other financiers deepen their understanding of international standards for project design and implementation. For instance, we organized a series of workshops on climate-smart connectivity last year with COP27 President Egypt, AIIB, and other partners. Approximately 500 participants from 65 countries explored variable technical solutions to make transport carbon-free and allow countries to access clean energy sources better. In addition, we organized 2 workshop series on sustainable financing, which brought together some 650 participants from over 80 countries and 24 financiers to share FI's experiences in promoting debt sustainability. To conclude, MCDF was created to deepen global partnerships for sustainable development. We are bringing partners with similar minds together for knowledge sharing, capacity building, and project preparation. Of course, we can't fill the financing and the knowledge gap alone. Our mission depends on the strong collaboration among the organizations and the countries represented here. Before I conclude, I just would like to share one story I had this year. You may attended the Islamic Development Bank Annual Meeting. It was a seminar on partnership. Before the start, I was approached by a young lady. She asked, am I from MCDF? I said, yes. I didn't know her, but she seems very excited. She told me she's working for an NGO in Sudan. And because our support to one interconnector transmission line project financed by AIIB, this project allows her organization to extend their support to the rural and remote areas in Sudan, which will allow them to help more children out of poverty. We definitely hope that we can rejuvenate that project as soon as possible. But this is very, very exciting to ourselves. We are very encouraged to continue our journey. So MCDF's work is only one of the many steps needed to radically evolve our approach to a better connected world. It's a small but important step forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wang, for giving us an overview of how MCDF is supporting, as a real, truly multilateral center, these questions of cross-border infrastructure, not only in project preparation and supporting countries raise their standards to be able to mobilize financing, and particularly sustainable financing, but also very practical ways in which capacity building is being developed to tackle what we're going to be discussing with the panel, some of the most important challenges in this area. So I want to invite our distinguished panel to join us here. I'll be doing introductions as we go in the conversation. So please, join us. Wonderful. So I'm personally very excited on this conversation. I think that we have a very diverse group of panelists representing economies that have grown because of the connectivity to the world, because of the cross-border infrastructure, and 3 international financiers that we believe are some of the most important leaders in connecting countries in the region. So I want to start the conversation with Her Excellency Ms. Tatiana Rosito, Deputy Minister of Finance for International Relations of Brazil and AIIB Governor, who's going to talk and share the experiences not only from Brazil, but actually she's an Asia expert, having been chief representative of Petrobras in China, minister counselor at the Brazilian embassy in Beijing and in Singapore, and advisor to the NDV. And you may have noticed that we are using a picture of Itaipu, the big dam that has brought us so many lessons about how to work across nations to develop cross-border infrastructure. So we'd love to hear from the Brazilian perspective how important it is for the economy, cross-border infrastructure projects, and given the tremendous experience that Brazil has had, what are some of the most important challenges and solutions that the country has developed?
Is it on? Oh. Hello? Yes? Yes, thank you, and good afternoon to all. Thank you, Ed, for the introduction. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you, Egypt Minister of Finance, Minister AIIB, MCDF, Chongjin, for organizing this and inviting us for this roundtable, and the AIIB, of course. It's a pleasure to be here again. So let me share. We are, I think, the only non-regional member. Actually, I mentioned that not only for, actually, my personal history, but yesterday at our discussions, our session, I mentioned that actually we feel very connected to Asia because, over last year, 43% of Brazilian exports went to Asia, about 30% to China. And we are, we have been proud for a long time in Brazil to be what we call a global trader, but more and more this also connects us to Asia. We feed so many countries with, food and healthy and safe food. This is very important for Brazil and for its international cooperation and cross-border connectivity. But also let me, referring to Itaipu, talk about connectivity in other dimensions, right? Connectivity in this sense has been also, I think, a vehicle, it's always a vehicle for peace, right? And I think we do have, in terms of, the continent, the South American continent, we do have mostly for a long time, peace in our borders. And this, especially in the south and the south cone of South America, has been very important and actually has been in diplomatic understandings for the Itaipu, for what led to be Itaipu. Today, Itaipu was then, after all the negotiations, was inaugurated in mid-80s. It's very important for Brazil and for Paraguay. We get a lot of our energy from there, and it was until Three Gorges was inaugurated, the largest also hydropower plant. I must say that it was also a source of inspiration, of big inspiration for the Three Gorges. I remember being at the embassy in Beijing and going through the records. We see how many uncountable missions we had, from China to Brazil to discuss aspects of, and today we have Three Gorges. And so connectivity and also in the, the rivers in the south has been always, very important. And also, like I say, I think a vehicle of peace and further of integration for our continent. We also had, I think there is a long-standing desire to further integrate, South America. There was this initiative, the initiative for the regional integration of South America that was very lively for many years. Now it has not working with this name again, the IRSA, but I think the desire is still there in other forms, right? And this ISA was part of a council of UNASUR, but today we actually have the community of Latin American states, the SHICC. And part of it, the desire of better connectivity now, I think it has also, it's important to talk about the north of Brazil. So we have actually borders with 10 countries, so, and a very large coast. So connectivity is of the essence for Brazil. We are not so connected to our global partners, so we need to put a lot of effort on that. And this, of course, comes with very important challenges in terms of enhancing our infrastructure of not railways, highways, ports, and airports. So those areas are very important part of the growth acceleration plan that was relaunched this year, and which is therefore connecting with many of external finances, including the MDBs. And I think there is a very large role also for, and I commend the work that has been done by MCDF. I think, as Chongjin just mentioned, those cross-border projects are very challenging. We know of some cross-border actually projects, railways or highways to connect actually South America and Asia. They have been there for a long time. They are not a complete reality yet, or they are not a reality. I think there's so many challenges in terms of design, in terms of really bankability, among others. So, but this is just one small example. But also, let me say, maybe to conclude, that looking up to the north and what we have today, and I think this new moment, I think the Amazon region is very much part of sustainable development, and one embodies a lot of challenges for Brazil, for the other 8 countries in the Amazon region. We have just convened an Amazon summit in August in Brazil. And interestingly, I think also to protect, one of the great insights is that to protect, we need actually to connect. So it's true that, connectivity in a disorganized way, or urbanization, if you, would know that most of the people in the Amazon, actually, they live in cities. Of course, we are also very interested in protect the native communities, but most of the people live in cities, and we need to deal with, in what ways we want to connect, what is connectivity for that region, but also to protect the native communities. We need to ensure, security, we need to curb illegal mining, logging, and so connectivity for those countries in South America. Again, cross-border connectivity is of the essence also for our long-term plan of sustainable development in Brazil and in the region. So I'll stop here.
No, excellent. Thank you so much, because really connectivity at the core of Brazil's role as the food basket for Asia and the world, but also that interesting insight that the protection of the Amazon, which is this global resource, in reality also depends on how good connectivity is and how well built is from the sustainable perspective altogether. Very happy now to have with us Mr. Solomon Quaynor, who's Vice President for the Private Sector Infrastructure and Industrialization of the African Development Bank. Recently joined the bank after a distinguished career with the IFC and in Wall Street with Merrill Lynch and Bear Stearns. And the African Development Bank is at the core of really connecting the African continent. And His Excellency, Dr. Maid, was talking about the Africa Free Trade Agreement. And I think that AFDB has been right there at the frontier of really not only financing, but helping on policy and consistency on planning and the like. So Mr. Quaynor, tell us, from your perspective, important trends that you see on connectivity in Africa, what are some of the most important challenges that your institution is working to try to resolve to really connect the continent all throughout?
Okay. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Your Excellency, Minister of Finance from Egypt, who's my governor as well, and Brazil is also one of the shareholders, so we do have common governors, or at least common stakeholders, and hopefully this would begin to also translate to our sharing knowledge, across continents, not just across borders. So let me provide some context as to why I think I'm being asked this question. The African Development Bank was set up to really promote regional integration and to do that really through infrastructure development. So this is our DNA. 20% of our portfolio is in regional infrastructure. In the last decade, $20 billion of our financing has really been around cross-border integration, okay? If you take a look also at, two measures of cross-border infrastructure, we've done really 10,000 kilometers of roads, particularly for cross-border, and we've done about 4,000 kilometers of transmission lines for cross-border. This is separate from what we do on a national basis in all 54 countries that we serve. And I put some emphasis on the 54 because that's going to lead to some of the challenges we have because of the fragmentation of our continent. And I was listening to the minister talking about 10 countries around Brazil. I wish that was my issue because then I would just go to Brazil, and once I create the right relationships with Brazil, I interconnect really with the 10 other countries, right? So the real game changer is really what the minister, from Egypt mentioned. It's, in terms of trends, it's the African Continental Free Trade Area. That is first and foremost the real game changer. Why do I say that? Well, it's changed the thinking, okay? Because the African Continental Free Trade Area, which I'll describe as CFTA for short, is about really intra-African trade. If you take a look at the colonial days actually built regional infrastructure to evacuate minerals, commodities. So it was really from the hinterland to the port and out. But now we have to pay attention to regional infrastructure that interlinks. And in fact, the president of Zambia likes to describe Zambia as not, landlocked, but land-linked, okay? Because now we have to pay attention to really the trade flows between Zambia and, Zimbabwe and Malawi, and not just really the regional corridors to take, our projects, out to the coast. If you take a look also at, so that for me is a very important trend. And, when we talk about policy and regulations, the essence of it is planning and setting the rules. So the planning environment has really changed. It's no longer just economic corridors to the port and out. It's really the logistics, networks internally. Now, another trend, another key trend for us has really been on the planning perspective is the fact that we've been able to really leverage the African Union to create what we call the Program of Infrastructure Development in Africa. This is where it prioritizes various regional projects, okay? And just imagine we have 54 countries. Asking 54 countries to really prioritize regional infrastructure because there isn't so much money to do every project is very challenging. So, to see the African Union able to exert itself to really set up, what we call PIDA for short. And on PIDA, where all the regional infrastructure projects we look at are, there's also a priority action plan for which we're on the second generation for the 2021 to 2030 period, and there are 63 projects that have been prioritized. So this is an important trend as well. I think on the digital end, that's another important trend, which was even further enhanced by the challenges in COVID, that we need to be interconnected, and not just in the urban centers, but interconnected between rural and urban. But it was also clear that we should be interconnected cross-border. So we're beginning to see a lot of regional digital connectivity projects. Even Google is putting a fiber, a fiber network, across the region. But a lot of GSM companies operate in contiguous countries, and the only reason that the assets are essentially segregated on a country basis is because of the borders. But if all of those, countries were one country, it would be an integrated system. So we're beginning to see, a trend in terms of interoperability across countries. And one of the benefits for that, for example, is, a trend around payment systems. Because if we're going to trade with each other, we need to have really that digital connectivity as a base so that payment systems, can also be similar. So in terms of challenges, clearly one of the big challenges is you have 54 countries, you have a treaty, but implementation of that has challenges. However, I'd like to say that the European Union did not come about in just a few years. It's taken a lot of time, so I like to look at really the glasses half full as opposed to half empty. It's a challenge. It's also a challenge at 3 levels. We have the national level, we also have the regional economic communities, so it's the likes of COMESA, ECOWAS, SADC, etc. And coordinating really across all of those is challenging. It's also, we also have the challenge really around, harmonizing, standards, and policies, etc. But once again, we're improving on that. And the last quick challenge I'll mention, which also relates to MCDF, is doing the right feasibility to get bankable projects out of the PIDA program. We don't have enough resources to do that, and so I do welcome the fact that MCDF, is approving projects in Africa. It's very additional, and we hope you get more resources so that we can benefit from that, and we can bring a lot of regional projects, to bankability. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Rainer, thank you very much. I think that that perspective that actually the AFCTA actually is going to take time, but the very practical steps and the work with the Africa Union and the PIDA program to start saying, okay, this is what collectively makes sense for the continent, and then you can come and support with the help with MCDF and others is just fantastic. And I'll walk out with the memory of Zambia is not a landlocked country, but a land-linked. I think that this seminar is really trying to move many of those landlocked countries around the world and make them land-linked. So it's my pleasure also to introduce Mr. Xijin Chen, Vice President for South, Central, and West Asia of the Asian Development Bank. And before ADB, he was with the Ministry of Finance of China. And he was Executive Director for China and the World Bank, where I had the great pleasure to work with him, and Board Director for China in the NDB and the AIIB. Now, Mr. Chen, the AIDB, like the AFDB, was in a way created with a DNA to support regional integration. And you have had really interesting mechanisms to accompany that long process of building the trust, preparing the projects, creating a vision that gets implemented with several sub-regions of Asia. So we'd love to hear your perspectives. What do you see to the future? What has the groundwork that ADB has prepared is leading to in the coming years? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. So first of all, I'm so delighted to see you here again after so many years. We've been working together in the World Bank. And also great honor to be invited. Special thanks to the Egypt Minister of Finance, Minister. So yeah, thank you very much. And also MCDF. I've been at the very beginning also work on the MCDF as well. So very proud to be invited here. For the cross-border connectivity, as this morning we discussed the MDB's reform, so the G20 request and MDB's evolution. First thing in our mind is our vision strategy. Maybe we need to reshape, rethink. So I think cross-border connectivity could be one of the issue of how we reshape our vision and strategy. So in order to further enhance the efforts in this area. Eddie, you have been asking how about the ADB, what we think about the trend in the future. Maybe a couple of things I like to just add there. Yeah, first of all, I think very much critical is get it to be connected. So this is something there. We still have, fair to say, so many years we've been working together. So it's a huge kind of improvement in the connectivity, cross-border connectivity, facilitation, and also lots of, like Zhongjing, you mentioned, the logistics all the way around the cross-border. So that's we should be appreciated ourselves for the partnership and for the previous efforts. But we still have lots to do. Yeah, so this is why I mentioned, first of all, we need to get it connected. Yeah, for instance, in my purview, look at so many areas, Georgia, north-south corridor still not connected. Armenia, if we travel in Turkmenistan or Tajikistan, somewhere you can only travel by 10 miles per hour around the corridor. So you can see that still a huge kind of challenge there. We've been talking about China, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyz railway for more than 20 years, but still not be able to conduct those connectivity. Some huge kind of project still waiting for there. For instance, the TAPI, and also, for instance, the Kasa railway to bring the Central West to the sea. So still pending. In terms of the way of the cross-border connectivity, we are very much pushing at like a multimodal transportations. So still need to be improved in many kind of dimensions. So I think this is something lots of efforts need to put there. So this is the first thing in my mind, I think maybe in our strategy in the future. Secondly, it's very critical. We are talking about global challenges. So cross-border connectivity infrastructure also heavily related on the decarbonization, on the green transportation. So this is something also in front of us. We are talking about from this year all the way to the future, we need to fully align with the Paris Agreement for the infrastructure. So this is somewhere we still need to think about that. And also railway systems there, efficiency is really something we need to improve. Then we need to put more efforts about the railway system connectivity. And also, Asia Pacific, we have a huge kind of potential of the electricity trade, power trade. But cross-trade still have a lot of regulation issues, infrastructure issues as well. So decarbonization, energy transition will be added more momentum in terms of cross-border connectivity. Third area, like Solomon, you mentioned the digitalization. I fully agree with that. Maybe add two things. One is the national single window. It's really been progressed a lot, but still the level of that still is it's somewhere we need to give the fully support there. Another is the cross-border inspection. Really was saving a lot of time. So this is maybe also we can add it for the digitalization of the cross-border. Last but not least, the point is that we, in Asia and the Pacific, we have a lot of sub-regional cooperation. For instance, we have the CARIC, we have a SHICC, we have a GMS, but things, so many years, seems like a lot of progress, but how about integrated of those sub-regional cooperation in terms of the cross-border? So this is something we still have the gap among those sub-regional cooperation. So this is something maybe we can build in our future strategy to see how to improve that. Let me pause here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. I really like the perspective that decarbonization is not only a national issue, but cross-border infrastructure is going to play an important role, connecting renewable sources with consumers across borders is going to be critical, as well as the efficiency of trade. Many of these borders, as you described in Asia, take so long to cross that introduces tremendous loss of competitiveness for national economies to integrate across regions. Now, my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Sanjay Gupta, Board Member and Executive Director for Financial Services of the Africa Finance Corporation, more than 30 years of experience in investment banking, private equity, and corporate finance. So from the AFC perspective, as an organization that has a very different angle, speed, and perspectives, we'd love to hear your sense of cross-border infrastructure and how do you approach those questions? Where do you see the challenges of AFC investing in these type of projects? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. And I'm mindful of the time. I think we are already past the time, so hopefully I'll keep it short and hopefully sweet. So, you know, our take as a relatively new and certainly a much smaller organization to the other organizations on this panel, we have a very pragmatic view towards infrastructure development in general and to plug into that cross-border puzzle that we are being asked to talk about. So for us, you know, infrastructure in itself, and certainly cross-border infrastructure, doesn't work if there is no cross-border solidarity, right, of some sort. It doesn't work if there is no cross-border trade, right? And it certainly doesn't work if there is no funding available across the borders, right? So from our point of view, we approach it in three ways. The institution itself, AFC, is a living example of cross-border solidarity because it was funded by African governments, getting together with African private sector to say, let us provide domestic capital for Africa's development first, de-risk these projects, and then find global capital to back it, right? So this is a good example of how cross-border solidarity can bring, hopefully, cross-border prosperity, right? The second aspect is the capital aspect. And I think we all know, and I was making a comment earlier on this in another panel, that capital is like Goldilocks, right? It doesn't like hot, it doesn't like cold, it likes warm. So it's our job in Africa to make that capital feel warm, right? And as you know, capital is fickle, particularly with risk perceptions on Africa so often so distorted. The capital that is fickle is also not available. So again, we take great pains in providing the environment for global capital to come in. The third part of my comment to you, and I'll stop because of time, is that we also believe fundamentally that infrastructure in itself, which includes energy solutions, cannot be sustainable and commercially viable if there is no industrial base to support it. An industrial base cannot and will not happen unless we systematically add value to our primary exports. So we have a strategy through our project development arm where we look into countries, what are they exporting, and what are the ways and means we can add value to those exports. We've done that in Gabon with timber, where they used to export logs of wood, now they export furniture. And that's like 5-6 times more export earnings. We're doing that in Benin with cotton. Now, why I'm giving you this example is it industrializes Africa, it creates cross-border trade, and it provides the sustenance for cross-border infrastructure to be commercially done, as opposed to looking for aid money or grant money. And that's how we approach the whole matter. Thank you.
Excellent, and I like this idea of at the core is solidarity. At the core is really making sure that the chicken and egg question of industrialization and trade through cross-border infrastructure work together, and capital that feels warm and welcome in Africa. Thank you. That was very practical. Mr. Xiyun Cheng is the Director General of the International Financial and Economic Cooperation Department of the Ministry of Finance, China, and also AIIB Director. And he has been represented China as Governor in IFA, Director for AIIB, and NDB, and Executive Director at ADB. So we very purposefully designed this panel to have important countries that think about cross-border connectivity at the beginning, at the end, and having a sandwich in between of financiers. So from Brazil to China, perspectives on how important has it been historically, but also to the future, cross-border infrastructure for the economic development of the country, and what are some of the barriers, challenges that you are seeing as you continue in that path of integration? Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Also, thank you, AIIB and the MCDF for invitation. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you, Egyptian government people, to show our heartfelt appreciation for this excellent arrangement for this annual meeting and the events, including these ones. I think a lot have been touched, so I will be try to be brief. To answer Eddie's question, definitely you see this cross-border infrastructure is very important for China and for others. Because you see, after decades of economic growth, China has realized our economic growth will not be sustainable. And you see, China will not be safe if our neighbors, other countries, is not going to grow together. That's why, you see, 10 years ago, we formally launched this Belt Road Initiative. The whole idea behind it is we're going to share, discuss together, build together, but also share with neighbors, other countries. You see a lot of landmark cross-border infrastructure has been built. I'll just take one example. That is China-Laos Railway. My vice minister has taken this example this morning, but I will do this from other perspectives. This railway is lasting 1,035 kilometers. It connects Kunming, which is the capital city of Yunnan province in South China, and the capital city of Laos PDR, Vientiane. So in south part of Yunnan, like Pur and Xishuangbanna, they never been connected with railway. Now they finished that history. And for Laos, we have transformed Laos from a landlocked country into a land-linked hub, as several colleagues mentioned, So that's, infrastructure connectivity. Number two is travel and trade. We have this railway just put into operation for 21 months. But so far, nearly 21 million passengers has been served. And you see more than 25 million tons of fruit has been delivered. So you can see tourist and trade is really prosperous along this way. Third one is it's not only traffic corridor, now it's economic corridor. A lot of logistics and even economic zones has been built along this line. The fourth one is regional cooperation and integration. VP Chen mentioned, and in the audience we can see Ayumi-san. We've been working very hard on this for the GMS. So by building this railway, we're quite confident we're going to further enhance regional cooperation and integration along the Mekong River economies, which Thailand, Cambodia, so on and so forth. So that's from China side, I just share one examples. Look at the future trend, from my side, I think there are several points. Number one is green, which has been discussed. I will not elaborate. Number two is digitalization. Again, I will not repeat. Third one is multimodal transport or integrated transport. Within China, we have realized we're not only going to build a network for railways, rail, so on and so forth. We're going to integrate them into one system. That means those cities will be connected with road, rail, waterway, air, and internet. If you look at the railways between China and Europe, many goods, fruit, actually was transported from the Shanghai, which was the downstream of the Yangtze River, and Wuhan, which was midstream of Yangtze River, to upstream city of Chongqing, then transport to Europeans, definitely some Central Asian countries. And we also want it from the end side, in the European side, not only connect with railway, but also with road, also we see waterways. So that's the point. Last point is on the new areas. China is going to work, you see, with other countries, and you see some institutions to build new areas of infrastructure, including, like you see, smart city, artificial intelligence, but also, like you see, big data and cloud computing. I think those was the future trend from my side. Thank you, Eddie.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chen. And now I want to invert and come back this way with your concluding thoughts on finance and lessons learned. So from your perspective, Mr. Chen, these projects are expensive, they're complicated, and therefore, how are you mobilizing different sources of finance? What innovations you see that are really exciting to be able to share with the audience on how to get the money for these projects? Any thoughts on that?
Okay. Again, you see, Eddie, I will be brief. Definitely, you see, financing is critical for cross-border infrastructure. So that's why you see China is working very hard with, you see, relative countries, organizations to build multi-level financial service systems. Among these systems, you see, we have several very important components. Number one is government funding. Every year, you see, China have you see, investment plan, which was sponsored by budget. Now you see, we're going to allocate a little bit bigger portion to support cross-border infrastructure projects. Number two is, you see, we're encouraging financial organizations to provide more financial support, which I will not go to details. If you're interested, you see, we can share information bilaterally. Third one is we're building new financial mechanisms, which is dedicated to support cross-border projects. For example, the Silk Road funds, which has been invested, you see, more than $20 billion to cover all kinds of projects covering 60 countries and regions. The fourth one is encouraging definitely private sector, you see, investment, which again, I will not touch upon the details. Lastly is definitely is MDBs, including AIIB, World Bank, ADB, so on and so forth, but also MCDF. We thought it's critical to provide, you see, project preparation and capacity building. So that's, you see, how China is going to find financing for that. But you see, beyond this fund side, we also think there are three areas we need to further enhance. Number one is to find more bankable projects, where you see MCDF can play a critical role. Number two is we also need to build a risk-sharing mechanisms. Lastly, we thought, you see, we also need to pay attention to the sustainability of the project itself after it was built. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me turn now to the financiers for interesting innovations and lessons on mobilizing the financing for that. Mr. Gupta, you talk about how to get that capital feeling warm. So anything in your portfolio or in the region that you have seen, this is a good way to feel them warm.
Yep, I'll provide 4 quick examples. As they say, deeds speak better than just theories. Just to tell you how we try and innovate, because, when we operate, we have this saying that where there is a need, there has to be a way. And there are needs on the continent, right? So, for example, we commissioned 2 weeks back a power project in Djibouti, a wind power project, right? And Djibouti, for those of you know, is a little port which essentially is strategically extremely important because 30% of global trade goes through that port. And it had no power. It basically operated on generators. Now, cut a long story short, we went in, did the studies, found out that we could do a wind power project, but no bankers were willing to bank it. No bankers were willing to bank it after we had de-risked the project. So we decided to do an equity bridge and provide the entire construction finance to commission the plant, after which lenders are queuing up. So that's one innovation I can talk about. Quickly, second one, as you probably know, we have a A3 rating, which is the third best rating on the continent. And we realize that a lot of African sovereigns and African private sector players are not able to raise finance. So we are providing credit enhancements to them for them to tap into the market. Third example, on the climate side, we've just created a climate resiliency fund where we want private sector capital to come in and fund climate resilient projects. But because the payoffs are different, the payback periods are longer, we felt that we needed to put a first loss cover for commercial capital to come on top. Another innovation. Fourth and last example I'll give you, some years back, 4 or 5 years back, there was a certain country in West Africa which needed to refinance its refinery, and essentially it was a state-owned enterprise and it was bankrupt. So we created an SPV in Luxembourg, issued loan notes from there, and we guaranteed it and then brought insurance from Lloyd's on top of it, and we issued those notes to European pension funds, which otherwise would not have come in. So I'm just giving you some examples of how we need to always innovate to bring in capital into Africa. Thank you.
Of course, there is a problem, there's a way. Thank you for those very practical examples. We're going on examples on innovation. So, Mr. Chen, from the broad portfolio of ADB, what would you like to share?
Let me mention a couple of things. One is, you need to be able to innovatively financing for the cross-border projects. First of all, I'd like to mention about yesterday in the opening, Simani also mentioned innovative instrument, for instance, the blended financing. So I think this is quite a significant area we can further explore. For instance, we have the project in India, in Bangladesh, in Uzbekistan. This is the way we are really try to explore not only the multilateral banks' money, but also we built into some package with the component of the climate change. So we can mobilize the climate technology fund, the climate development fund into the whole project. So many ways of doing that. Secondly, I want to echo E.D. Chen mentioned the private sector. So this is really some area we can further promote it. But this will be rely on the system reform, because you need to attract the private sector to participate. For instance, many developing member countries, they actually don't have like a tariff system. So then you need to be able to work with them to do the pilot, to set up the tariff system, and gradually to make the tariff system would be able to support the private sector to lower the cost of the participation. And also for the PPP mechanism, it's going to be a very, very important area for us to very innovatively to deal with that. For instance, ADB work with the Sri Lanka, so this is in a very early stage of the PPP mechanisms there. So we set up the several years, 3 phases of that. So first of all, support them for the upstream reform. So would be enabling the PPP. Second, the pilot project. So past works of the project. And the third phase, we can somehow fully implement it. So those kind of innovation we can pursue for the cross-border.
No, and I like that perspective that sometimes the innovations is getting back to basics and getting it done in new and practical ways moving forward, all the way from tariffs to PPPs. Mr. Quaynor, broad portfolio also in Africa, lots of innovations. What would you like to highlight today?
Okay, so I think we should admit that a bankable national infrastructure project is very different from a bankable regional infrastructure project. And part of the reason I say this is I used to be in a private sector DFI, pure private sector. So we didn't have really the resources to come up with integrated public-private solutions. When it comes to regional infrastructure, most of it is going to be publicly funded, but we need to also enhance it to look for where private sector can participate. So for me, I think the first innovation that we are actually implementing is we plan from a regional corridor perspective, where we're not just looking at the multimodal transport aspects, we're also looking really at the special agro-processing zones that could actually be supported along, which goes to really what Sanjeev said about industrialization, right? We are an agrarian economy, an agrarian continent, so we're focusing really on industrializing around food. And when we do this, essentially, we are then able to bring our public sector resources, our private sector resources to deliver on cross-border infrastructure. So that's one. I mean, we've all admitted that, at least in the context of Africa, the lack of bankable projects is the biggest problem. So what we are doing is we are also creating institutions that focus on project development. This is why we created Africa 50, which is the premier infrastructure project development institution in Africa. This is why we have the NEPAD IPPF in the African Development Bank. And also now we're establishing a partnership approach with the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa. And once again, this is to make sure that we can really bring more cross-border projects to market in a shorter project development approach. And then lastly will be the financial instruments and also the thinking that we change as MDBs. We need to move from just deploying our balance sheet to rather, deploying our guarantees to de-risk, to credit enhance, and really bring capital, financial capital into our projects, whether it's the $145 trillion worth of financial assets globally, but even for us, we need to really focus on the $2.4 trillion equivalent of assets in our African pension funds, African sovereign wealth funds, African life insurance companies, and then lastly, it's about partnerships. So we have a co-guarantee platform that AFC is on, AfriExim is on, TDB is on. We come together and we risk share. And, we would like to invite, the likes of AIIB to join as well. And by the way, whenever you say ADB, I wake up, I forget, this is the other ADB. Thank you.
Yes. No, and actually, this idea of, look, you can't do it alone. This is too important. Everybody needs to come together in the partnership. But it's not only the project itself. How do you actually think of economies that gets transformed through that project? So, Ms. Rosito, you have the final word. You have heard the financiers. Are these the financial solutions that Brazil needs? Or what else are you thinking innovatively, pushing the envelope in your country?
Thank you, Ed. I think so. It's very convergent. I think we, in this new administration in Brazil, we believe that the big push will come from the right combination of public and private investment. So public, and then we have just launched a growth acceleration plan with $350 billion in investments for the next 4 years. This includes investments from the budget. And for that, we have been actually, since the beginning of the year, putting, let's say, the house in order. We have adopted a new fiscal framework. We are dealing with that sustainability and doing a tax reform. We believe that domestic resource mobilization is also crucial for that. But we also believe that we should be able to strike the right combination, doing the right risk sharing depending on the sector, depending, on the specifics of the project. So for that, and within, we also have the Minister of Finance and the Minister Haddad has announced this ecological transformation plan. This is a plan that was actually done in conjunction with the Ministry of Environment in Brazil and also all the ministries in agriculture, development, and industry, but is coordinated by the Minister of Finance. And so this states very clear that finance is crucial for all our plans of ecological transition, transition to net zero, decarbonization, energy transition, and efficiency, and so on and so forth. So the finance is at the center. So some of the measures that have already been announced, they connect very much to how we would like to incentivize, the private sector. So first, we will launch the carbon market, in Brazil. This is already, being, negotiated by the minister with Congress. We have launched public consultations for taxonomy to be published next year. So giving the right incentives for what we think it's green in Brazil. And of course, this this will interact with regulation from the financial sector, banking. And the third pillar is also of this first measures is the sustainable bonds. That the first sovereign sustainable bonds to be launched by the Brazilian government. We do have green bonds launched by many corporates, but it will be the first sovereign bonds. And those bonds will also help fund some crucial also leverage for this, which for the whole planned national development, which is the National Development Bank. So part of, for example, what we call the climate fund, especially for those loans that will have some subsidized rates, as for example, dealing with forest degradation and recovery of degraded land. So for these, you have specifics and lower interest rates. So this will help be funded with these sustainable bonds, sustainable and social bonds to be launched soon.
Fantastic.
So this is part of our
Excellent.
plan. Thank you.
So I want to thank the panel not only for staying on time, which you did a fantastic job, but also, I don't know if you noticed the diversity of ideas in this last round of solutions. At the beginning, we thought that you were all going to repeat, but everybody get a completely different solution, from regional mechanisms to really very practical credit enhancement options, to the issue of innovation for the basics, to how to tackle partnerships, bringing together for financiers, to sustainable financing and the role of national development banks. Please join me in a big round of applause for the panelists. Thank you so much for the conversation today.